Might get underway this morning. As I said, we are waiting for Minister Thistlethwaite, and at some point I will exit stage left and go and bring him in, but we're not quite at that point yet, I don't think. So I wanted to make some preliminary remarks and get proceedings underway. First of all, my name is Michael Annett. For those of you who haven't met me, I'm the National President of the Defence Reserves Association, having taken over earlier this year after a 10-year tenure of Major General Paul Irving, who's here with us today, and I'll have a bit more to say about Paul's contribution and time as the National President in a little while. But my own perspective on today is that it's a very important gathering. It's an opportunity for us to, in particular, reflect on what the Defence Strategic Review means for the ADF's reserve, and to get some outcomes from today that will enable us to provide an input to the impending strategic review into the reserve that was recommended in the Defence Strategic Review. So welcome, and thank you for coming along to the 2023 conference. There are a couple of prosaic matters I need to mention at the start. Exits are where you see the green illuminated signs above doorways. The most obvious one is to out through the front door that way, which would probably be the natural human reaction anyway, and also just follow what the staff tell us to do in that case. Toilets or bathrooms, if you go out through this main door here, turn to your immediate right and keep turning right. There's a long corridor and the bathrooms are down that way. Phones, please switch them to silent or switch them off. And once we get into the Q&A side of today, if you could just stand and say who you are and where you're from when you ask a question. There will be some Slido questions here on the screen for those who are attending virtually, and welcome to all of you as well today that have registered and are here to participate in proceedings. It's very important that we have that online audience as well, because we are pretty much at capacity in here, as you can see. I just wanted initially to make the point, and I will come shortly to two, if you like, ceremonial aspects. I did want to do an acknowledgement of country, and I'm going to do that on behalf of all the speakers today. So unless you feel particularly needy in terms of doing your own, it would be good if we could keep things moving by mine being the one to start proceedings. And I also will ask everyone in a couple of minutes' time to join me in an act of remembrance, and I'll recite the ode. But I just wanted to start by, as the new National President, reinforcing what the two core objectives of the Defence Reserves Association is. And they are very simple. The first one is to optimise the ADF's part-time component and their capacity to contribute to national defence, those national defence imperatives that are set out very clearly in this year's Defence Strategic Review. The second objective is to advocate on behalf of all those who have served in the various permutations of the reserve over the years, citizens, military forces, the reserve, etc., ensuring that they receive appropriate, equitable and consistent treatment by, in particular, the Department of Veterans Affairs and other government agencies that have a role to play in that support. And of course, thanks to Paul Irving's great efforts a couple of years ago, the Defence Reserves Association now has a seat on the table at ESORT, the Ex-Service Organisation Round Table, which is the primary forum at which the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs and through her the Minister get to understand what the various constituent parts of the veteran community need. And so it's a great opportunity for us now that we are sitting at that big table. I'm happy to have people talk to me today, throughout the day, on where you believe the Defence Reserves Association should be focusing its efforts. And all that input, there'll be plenty of scope. There's morning tea, lunch, for those of you who are staying for the dinner this evening as well. So very happy to have a chat to everybody during the course of the day. A couple of distinguished guests. Of course, we have the Chief of the Defence Force, General Campbell. Sir, wonderful to have you with us. Mr Luke Houth is already here with us, Shadow Minister for Defence Personnel and Shadow Minister for Defence Industry. Member for Petrie, I got my pronunciation right, I hope, down up near Moreton Bay, lovely spot. Good to have you with us, Luke. And as I mentioned, we are just waiting on Minister Thistlethwaite. I should also mention that we've got a galaxy of generals here, all of whom have been there are many generals here, but in particular from a DRA perspective, I wanted to mention Generals Barry, Irving, Guard, Brereton, Flouth and Melick, all of whom have either been on DRA executives of various kinds, or have either been divisional commanders, or have served in that joint reserves and cadets. It goes by a different name now, but in that capacity. So it's great to have you all there as well. I mentioned General Melick. He's also here in his capacity today as the National President of the RSL. And we have Del Gowdry, who's the National President of the Defence Force Welfare Association as well. Del, great to have you with us here today. And we also have a very significant organisation, the Australian Defence Association, Neil James, a regular attendee at our conferences, and Neil's again here today, so great to have you with us, Neil, to facilitate a couple of things later on. Very briefly, who am I? Some of you know me, most probably don't. So my background, I'm a hybrid, like many reservists are these days. 26 years in the regular army. I started at Duntroon the year before the CDF, so obviously something happened, but anyway. So 26 years in the regular army, and then I went out into the civilian world. I was 14 years as the Chief Executive Officer of the Victorian branch of the RSL, and I've done some project work and a short-term contract as well with the Department of Veterans Affairs to assist them in rolling out the first 6 of those new things called Veteran and Family Wellbeing Hubs, which I did immediately after I finished up as a CEO. I soldiered on in the reserve, and because I'd had a couple of reserve postings during my regular army time, and I enjoyed them. And I worked for Paul Irving. I was his chief of staff when he was commander of 2nd Division. Survived that ordeal. Just joking, Paul. And I really wanted to continue to contribute. So I served on, and I represent a spectrum of service, I guess. Obviously, CIRCAT 7, my regular army time, but I also have filled CIRCAT 5 appointments, Commander 4 Brigade, Director General Reserves Army. I've done CIRCAT 3 project work, and I'm doing that at the moment. And when I immediately left the regular army, I was CIRCAT 2, even though it wasn't called that then. And I've also been ServOp-C, as we now call Continuous Full-Time Service, which was me when I went to Afghanistan in 2015 and 16 as a task group commander. So I've covered a reasonable span of the spectrum in terms of the nature of my service. So I bring that to the National President's role. Okay, what I'd like to do today, on behalf of everyone, as in terms of acknowledgement, is to acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia, particularly the Turrbal people, whose land on which we meet today, and pay our respects to their elders, past and present. I would also like to pay my respects to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who have contributed to the defence of Australia in times of peace and war. I would also now like to ask you, if you can, to stand and join me in the ode to fallen and departed comrades. Particularly today, I'd like to bring to mind Captain Daniel Lyon, Lieutenant Maxwell Nugent, Warrant Officer Class 2 Joseph Laycock and Corporal Alex Knaggs of the 6th Aviation Regiment, who died in the service of their country. Also, I'd like to remember today Major General Warren Glennie, a past National President of the Defence Reserves Association and a proud Royal New South Wales Lancer, of which he was the Honorary Colonel. And appropriately today, also our 523 Vietnam dead. They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget. Thank you, everyone. The other couple of things I wanted to mention . We also have, I don't think he's joining us for the morning's proceedings, but we do have with us later today, and for those who are staying for the dinner this evening, Dr. Andrew Kilsby. Andrew has just finished writing the history of the Defence Reserves Association up until this point in time, and we are by way of launching that book in a soft way today. More will be said about that at this evening's dinner. And in fact, we have Andrew as the dinner speaker this evening. So that'll be very interesting. And given the origins of the Defence Reserves Association, which some of you would know was established by Major General Paul Cullen in the early 1970s, it'll be a fascinating talk this evening. While I've got the opportunity, I also just want to indicate, in case I forget at the end of the day, the fact that these sorts of events don't just happen. We've had tremendous support to bring about today from the Defence Reserves Association Queensland branch and Rick Olive, who's here as the State President of the Queensland branch, done a fabulous job in pulling this together. The United Service Club, where we're meeting today, has always been a strong supporter, of course, of Queensland's defence community, both full-time and part-time, and it's appropriate that we meet here today. And we've received a range of different forms of support from Defence. So I just wanted to acknowledge that up front today. By way of thanking Paul Irving, and he will be thanked again this evening at the dinner, but it would be remiss of me, given not everybody who's going to be at the dinner, or not everyone who's here today is able to stay for the dinner this evening, I should say, to acknowledge Paul's 10 years, a mighty effort as the DRA National President. As I mentioned, I worked with Paul when he was Commander 2nd Division. Paul is someone who has served since the 1960s, the late 1960s, when it was still the CMF, through the reserve years and rising to Commander 2nd Division. But Paul has always been a passionate and powerful advocate for the reserve. A range of things were achieved during his tenure, including, as I mentioned, securing a seat at the Ex-Service Organisation Roundtable, something we had been seeking for many years, and a range of contributions to the issues that have been current in the reserve community for some considerable time, especially around matters such as conditions of service, remuneration, incentivising the transition of people from full-time service to part-time service, etc. So, Paul, on behalf of everyone here and all reservists of whatever generation, thank you for your time as a National President. Which enables me just to recap what I said a couple of minutes ago about our two key objectives as an association. In terms of the first, around optimising the ADF part-time component's capacity to contribute to national defence, we wish to be, and we want to seem to be, a powerful, positive and relevant contributor to that discussion. And they're three very important adjectives to describe the way we want to go about that. And secondly, in terms of our ongoing care and support and advocating for the care and support of those who have served in the reserve over the generations, we will be a strong advocate for those matters. Sometimes you need to be very persistent, and we will be that too. Apropos our most recent campaign around ensuring that the non-liability healthcare card, the white card as it's generically known, is not prevented from being accessed by those who have not met what is in our view an entirely artificial distinction of having had 1 day's continuous full-time service. We believe that all veterans are veterans, and that if you can access the non-liability healthcare card having served without continuous full-time service but have been exposed to hazards and experiences that now require you to be supported by the nation, then you should have access to that non-liability healthcare card, at a minimum. So that's just an example, and we'll persist with that particular line of effort. The final thing that I wanted to cover by way of opening remarks was really just to point out that we are a federated structure. Most of our state branch presidents, I've already mentioned Rick, Peter Moore is over there from South Australia, Peter Alkermade from Victoria, and others. Certainly all are attending virtually, if not physically. And so that federated structure is important because there are particular local issues that affect part-time forces that are not necessarily national in scope, and it's important that state branches can bring those matters forward. And in fact, our annual general meeting as an association is here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and anyone who is a member is very welcome to attend that AGM. Well, I think I've said enough, right? And it would be wonderful if the Minister walked right in now as if on cue. I'm not sure whether that's going to happen. So I'll stop now and just take a pause, and let's all just wait for the Minister's arrival. He should be imminent. Thank you.